Today we're going to be looking at modeling and writing two-step equations. This is just like what we did yesterday, except we're going to start with a model. Now when we start with a model, we're going to be shown a picture, and it's going to have negatives, it's going to have positives, and it's going to have x's. And you're going to have either an equal sign or an inequality sign. Your first step when given a model is to write the equation or the inequality. Because once you write the equation or the inequality from the model, then you're going to use the same steps we used yesterday and just solve from the equation. Okay, so on this first example, we're shown a model, and it is an equation because there's an equal sign right here in the middle of the two pictures. So I'm just going to write what I see. On this left side, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see a positive 7. It is an equation, so there's an equal sign. I have 2x. There's two x's, and so it's 2x. And then this is a negative 1, so minus 1. So there's my equation, and it should look very familiar as to what to do next, because you just solved a whole bunch of these yesterday. Okay, so when I solve, I'm going to start with the equation. That's all I'm looking at. 7 equals 2x minus 1. I'm going to drop my line from the equal sign. I'm going to box my x, and it is a 2x. And I'm going to start with the number that is tagging along. I have to get rid of it. And so my tag along is a negative 1, and so I have to do the opposite. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Remember, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Once I add 1, the 1's will cancel on the right side. I'm going to bring down the 2x because I still have it. There's my equal sign, and a positive 7 and a positive 1 will give me a positive 8. And so now I'm looking at 2 times x equals 8. But since this is a multiplying situation, I have to divide because I always do the opposite of what I see. When I divide both sides by 2, because what you do to one side you have to do to the other, the 2's will cancel. 2 divided by 2 is 1. That gives me the x by itself, the 1x, and it is going to equal 8 divided by 2, and that would be 4. So my x is equal to 4. So when I go to prove, I am going to start with the equation. 7 equals 2x minus 1. Remember, you can pause the video at any time if you need time to write. I'm going to substitute 4, which is what my solution was, into x. And so I have 7 equals 2 times 4 minus 1. I have 7 equals 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 minus 1. And then you're going to see that 7 equals 7. It matches, the left side matches the right side, so I know my solution of x equals 4 is correct. All right, so now we're ready to graph. Remember, when we graph an equation, there's only one solution that makes the equation true, and it is 4. So I'm going to just make my circle, my closed dot, because it is only one solution that makes it true. And I'm going to put a 4 underneath because x equals 4. Only one solution makes it true. So it is a closed dot at 4. Okay, so now let's look at the second one. Your second one is an inequality. There's my inequality symbol. I am going to start the same way. I'm going to write the inequality. I'm going to write exactly what I see. Make sure you copy the inequality exactly as it's shown in the picture. Okay, so on the left side, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have a negative 7. They're negatives. I can see that there's little negatives inside my circles. My inequality is greater than or equal to. On the right side, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5x, and 2 negatives, so that's a minus 2. So my inequality reads negative 7 is greater than or equal to 5x minus 2. When we solve, we're going to start with the inequality, just like we did yesterday. So I'm going to go negative 7 greater than or equal to 5x minus 2. I'm going to drop my line for the inequality. To separate the two sides of the inequality, I'm going to box my x, and it's going to show me the tag-along number that I have to work with first. Okay, so it is a -2, so I'm going to do the opposite, which is a +2 to both sides. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. When I do this, my 2's cancel. I am left with 5x. The inequality symbol, if I'm reading from the x, it would read less than or equal to. A -7 and a +2. Remember, when the signs are different, it's a subtraction problem. 7 minus 2 is 5. And the 7, which is negative, is a larger number, so my sign is negative. Okay, so I have -5 is greater than or equal to 5x. Again, this is multiplying, so I'm going to divide both sides by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. That gives me the 1x, which is the x by itself. I'm going to make sure that the inequality is facing the correct way. It is pointing at the x, and so it still is here. And a -5 divided by 5 is a -1. Okay, we always read from the x. And so even though this says -1 is greater than or equal to x, when I graph, I want to read from the x. And so sometimes it's easier to rewrite it. But make sure that when you rewrite, everything is facing the correct way. So if I start with the x, the inequality is pointing to the x, and so I'm going to make sure that it is still pointing to the x. And then I'm going to put the -1 on the other side. So now, x is less than or equal to -1. This is easier to read and graph and to find a solution, a number in the solution to prove. It is the exact same thing as -1 is greater than or equal to x, but I want to read it always from the x. Okay, so I need a number that is less than or equal to -1. Since I have equal to, I am going to use -1. So I start with my equation, or my inequality, I'm sorry. I'm going to substitute a -1 for x, so I have -7 is greater than or equal to 5 times the -1 minus 2. -7 is greater than or equal to 5 times -1 is -5 minus 2. And then I have -7 is greater than or equal to a -5 and a -2. The signs are the same, so I'm going to add and keep the sign. So it is a -7. -7 is equal to -7, so I know my solution is correct. Okay, so now I'm going to graph what x was less than or equal to. So since it's less than or equal to, it is going to be a closed circle at -1. And this time I have an arrow because it's all numbers that are less than or equal to -1. So my arrow is going to go to the left. Your arrow matches the way the inequality is facing. So x is less than or equal to -1. And so there is your correct graphing. Okay, if you have any questions, you're fixing to do an assignment that is all models. I want you to start with the model, start with the equation or inequality. You're going to write the equation or inequality first. You can check it to make sure that you have written it correctly, and then you will receive the paper to where you will solve all of the problems. If you have any questions, you can wait and ask me on Monday. If you, hopefully whoever is in the classroom will be able to help you. Okay, y'all have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.